The sun had barely risen over the Alabama horizon when the convoy rolled through the dusty gates of Camp Aliceville. It was May 1944. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, the quiet stillness of an American morning. Inside the trucks sat weary German soldiers, men captured in North Africa and shipped across the Atlantic under tight guard. Their uniforms hung loose, faces drawn, eyes hollow from exhaustion and defeat. They had imagined the worst. Back home, Nazi propaganda had painted America as a nation of cruelty, a land of vindictive guards and endless punishment. Some whispered that they would be starved, others that they would never return home alive. But when the trucks stopped, what they found was not cruelty, it was silence. And the smell of something cooking. What began that morning would become one of the strangest and most human chapters of the Second World War, a story not of victory or vengeance, but of mercy behind barbed wire. Camp Aliceville was not what the prisoners had imagined. Neatly arranged barracks stood in rows beneath tall Alabama pines. Watchtowers loomed above fences, but the guards within were calm, even casual. Beyond the wire lay open fields, a baseball diamond, and the hum of distant laughter. One soldier blinked in disbelief. "They built this for prisoners," he muttered. Another scoffed. "It's a trick. Comfort before punishment." Yet beneath the cynicism, confusion flickered. The certainty that had carried them through war began to fracture. When they stepped from the trucks, the American guards called out orders in English, firm, but not cruel. The soldiers moved into lines, expecting blows or humiliation. None came. A sergeant with a slow southern drawl gestured toward the barracks. "You'll be processed, then fed. Keep it orderly." The word "fed" rippled through the line like electricity. Food, real food. After registration came showers, warm water, soap, clean uniforms. One prisoner, a schoolteacher from Hamburg, stared at the bar of soap in his palm as though it were gold. "In France," he whispered, "we had nothing like this." His comrade nodded. "Maybe they want to keep us healthy, for work." It was easier to believe that than to accept the truth. Their captors were treating them like men. By evening, hunger gnawed at every stomach. They expected thin stew, maybe stale bread. But then, from the kitchen, came the scent, rich, savory, impossible. Roast meat. Fresh bread. Private Ernst Keller frowned. "They must be feeding the officers first." "No," his friend replied slowly. "That's for us." Inside the mess hall, they stopped in disbelief. Tables stretched the length of the room, trays of roast beef steaming beneath metal lids, bowls of vegetables, pitchers of milk, buttered rolls stacked high. And behind the counter, American soldiers, smiling, ladling generous portions onto plates. One prisoner whispered, "Das kann nicht dein Mahlzeit sein. This can't be our meal." The guard handing him a plate looked puzzled. "What's that?" he asked kindly. The German only shook his head. Silence filled the hall as the men began to eat. The first bites came slowly, cautiously, as if the food might be taken away. Then came the flavor, thick gravy, warm bread, butter that melted to gold. For some, the shock was too much. One man fainted mid-meal. Medics rushed in, not with anger, but with care. "He's exhausted," the camp doctor said. "Feed him gently when he wakes." The sound of cutlery echoed, not the clatter of defiance, but of disbelief turning into hunger, and hunger into gratitude. From the corner, Captain Robert Hanley, the camp commander, watched quietly. He had fought in North Africa. He had seen what starvation did to a man's soul. Now, His mission was not vengeance, but dignity. Security, he told his staff, isn't just about fences. It's about showing them what their leaders stole, their humanity. Among the prisoners sat Captain Wilhelm Brandt, a baker from Cologne. He stared at the abundance before him and whispered, "Our people starve, and here we eat like kings." A young American guard overheard. "Something wrong, sir?" he asked. Brandt met his eyes. "You treat your prisoners better than we treated our soldiers." The guard frowned slightly. "We just follow orders," he said. "Everyone eats. That's how it works here." For the first time, Brandt realized, in America, compassion was policy. That night the barracks were filled with whispers, half disbelief, half guilt. Some men feared punishment for enjoying the meal. Others admitted it felt right. Outside, the Alabama crickets sang, and for the first time since their capture, sleep came without fear. The next morning, life at Camp Aliceville found its rhythm. The prisoners rose at dawn, lined up for roll call, and were assigned to work details. Some repaired fences, others tended gardens, dug trenches, or helped in the kitchen. Sergeant Henry Collins, a guard barely in his 20s, watched them with quiet curiosity. "They work hard," he remarked to a fellow soldier. "Guess they've had enough of war." By midday, in the heavy southern heat, Collins carried a bucket of water and a plate of sandwiches to the laborers. "Eat," he said simply. "You've earned it." The Germans hesitated. Was it a trick? A test? But when they saw the Americans eating beside them, laughing casually, suspicion faded. Keller bit into his sandwich, soft bread, slices of ham, and felt tears sting his eyes. Brandt shook his head. "You waste supplies on us," he said. Collins shrugged. "A man's got to eat, doesn't he?" That answer lingered. The next days passed quietly. The men began to talk, first among themselves, then with their guards. English words mixed with German phrases, punctuated by awkward smiles. Even laughter began to return. By June 1944, the camp had settled into a strange peace. The fences that once symbolized captivity now seemed almost invisible. The men stopped staring at the wire. Instead, they watched the open fields beyond. Some worked on nearby farms. Private Keller labored under the sun beside an American farmer named Harold Pierce. Pierce often brought them lemonade in a tin pail. "Hot out here," he'd say. "Can't fight heat with pride." The Germans were bewildered. They had been told Americans would spit on them. Instead, they were offered lemonade. Inside the camp, life took on a rhythm of quiet creativity. Prisoners built furniture, planted gardens, even held Sunday concerts. One man found an old accordion. Another, a violinist from Dresden, restrung an instrument from scavenged wire. Music drifted over the barracks like a language without borders. One evening, Sergeant Collins passed by and found a group sketching portraits of the camp. He peered over his shoulder. The drawing showed the guards, the trees, the sky beyond the fence. The artist, a thin man named Otto, looked up. "We draw what we miss," he said softly. "Freedom." Collins nodded. "You'll get there," he replied. "War doesn't last forever." By late summer, permission came at last. The prisoners could write home. Each man received a single sheet of paper, thin and precious. They wrote carefully, aware that censors would read every line. Private Keller began. "Dear Mother, I don't know where to begin. They treat us well here. We are fed, we work, and we are not beaten. It feels strange to say, but I do not suffer." He stared at his words in disbelief, and guilt. Across the room, Brandt wrote to his wife. The Americans are not what we were told. They are strict but fair. The food is abundant, too abundant. I eat while you stand in line. Some letters brought joy when replies came, others heartbreak. Otto received news that his home in Hamburg had been destroyed, his family gone. That night, he burned the letter in a tin cup and whispered, They gave me food, they gave me music, but they took everything else. Compassion and destruction, existing side by side, tore at the prisoner's sense of loyalty. How? Keller asked quietly one night. Can we hate a nation that treats us with kindness, while our own leaves us in ruin? Autumn passed. The war dragged toward its end. Newspapers in the camp told of Allied advances, of the right collapsing, city by city. When Berlin finally fell, Camp Aliceville fell silent. No cheers. No tears. Only the hollow quiet of men who no longer knew who they were. Captain Hanley addressed them that afternoon. Germany has surrendered, he said evenly. The war is over. You are no longer our enemies, only prisoners. But the guns have stopped firing. That means something. For the first time, no one argued. That evening, the mess hall was still. The same meal, roast beef, bread, milk, but it no longer tasted of surprise. It tasted of loss. Brandt sat across from Keller, untouched plate before him. I can't stop thinking about home, he murmured. We fought for a lie. Keller nodded slowly. Then maybe we build something true when we return. In the days that followed, prisoners were allowed to read American newspapers, and saw the images of concentration camps. Men who had once fought proudly now sat in stunned silence. Brandt folded a paper carefully and whispered, We were blind. Keller answered softly, Now we see, but too late. That night, they gathered under the pale Alabama moon. They spoke not of orders, but of conscience. Some confessed guilt. Others wept. Weeks later, word arrived, repatriation. Some would soon return to Europe. The announcement stirred mixed feelings, joy, fear, and uncertainty. Private Keller walked the perimeter fence one last time. Sergeant Collins approached quietly. You'll be going home soon, he said. Keller smiled faintly. Home, he repeated. I wonder what that means now. Collins leaned against the fence. It means starting over. That's what we all do after a war. A farewell meal was held that evening, mirroring their first. Tables filled with food, laughter, the clink of metal trays. But this time, disbelief had been replaced by gratitude. Captain Hanley stood before them one last time. When you came here, he said, you were our prisoners. Now you leave as men who have seen both sides of war. Remember, humanity exists even in your enemy. The world will need that memory. Silence followed, sacred, unbroken. The next morning, as trucks pulled away from Camp Aliceville, Keller and Brandt turned for a final look. The barbed wire glinted in the sunlight, the towers stood tall, but the fear was gone. I came here a soldier, Brandt said softly, but I leave as something else. Keller asked, What's that? Brandt paused. A man who understands mercy. The road ahead stretched eastward, toward shattered cities and uncertain peace. Behind them, in the quiet heart of Alabama, the story of compassion had already been written. They had come as enemies. They left as witnesses. In a war defined by destruction, the greatest victory was not won with guns, but with humanity. Because even in the darkest of times, kindness can rebuild what hatred tried to destroy.